It is Leenock versus LucifroN in the upper bracket. And while LucifroN may have a 7 in his name, he's looking to be #1 in the game. But he has got probably his biggest challenge so far here in Golden League Round 2. Let's hop in and see how he handles off-meta combat. Because Leenock, he's going for the English here on Dry Arabia. Meanwhile, LucifroN, kind of the more tried and true, the more established choice so far in this tournament, going for the Rus on Dry Arabia. I am still ripping my hair out in confusion how the Rus are more or considered less meta for Dry Arabia with what we've been seeing, even in round 1 compared to the Delhi. But you know what, whatever. Like, move on from, of course, Delhi is OP, so we had to ban it everywhere. For those unfamiliar with how this format works, in off-meta combat, by default, a map has 3 civilizations banned on it, and then the players specifically target one civ that their opponent cannot pick. Now, you may already, being the astute viewer that you are, note that this leaves a very finite pool of remaining civs for a series. And that's why, to make sure that no one gets to a point where they're too predictable or runs out of civs in longer series than best of 3s, it means that every time you move to a new map, there is no ruling like in other tournaments where you can't pick the same civ. So in theory, to give Leenock as an example here, he's picked the English. The English are, by default, not banned on any map. They're not one of the top 3 for any single map in rotation. Which means that you could actually go 3 games in a series and pick the English every single time as long as your opponent did not specifically ban that one civ from you in that game. So, first thing we have to consider here is, what is the generation looking like for LucifroN? Has he got the option to go on the boards? Because the boards are shifted over the sides here and a little bit far away from the wood lines. And you are up against the English. That's where I think this play can be very gluttonous. There's a lot of civs I really love seeing the ball play against. The English probably feels like the one you're rolling the dice with, because if your English opponent is rushing up into feudal and they reach their 3.5, 4 minute timing around that kind of layering and get into the lombos, they can pull across quick enough that they might intercept you running to the board and then snipe you out before you get defenses up. So what I've been seeing so far out players in this specific matchup with the Rus is they might consider pro scouts instead and keep a condensed base to ensure that the lombos cannot punish them for spreading wide. The interesting part, though, is I feel like Leenock might delay his tech up timing. Like, the way Big League plays this, he's more often than not a fan of getting the Dark Age Wheelbarrow alongside the Mill and Farms first. So usually the way this has worked, especially before the patch, it was just kind of these two, is your openings would be either Wheelbarrow Dark Age with initial Farms placed down and then Feudal, or you would rush Feudal to get Lombos out. The interesting thing is actually the game has changed a little bit for the English, and they now have this new spangly, shiny Man-at-Arms rush, where the Man-at-Arms, although he only does 8 damage and thus basically has a plastic sword, you could push him out quick enough to be across your opponent's gold line at 2 minutes in. This build just doesn't work against the Rus, though. Like, this civ doesn't need gold, so I'm glad Leenock identified this and didn't make that play. I've already watched one of the 2 players do the whoopsie-daisy, invest in 2 Man-at-Arms, run across to a Rus player's base, and then do nothing to stop their tech up because, well, the Rus get their gold elsewhere via this bounty system. Looks like timing should match up fairly well. LucifroN so far only going up to 3 scouts. A lot of players right now, as the Rus, they'll stop at 3 or 4 maximum. Usually if you're going up to 5 to 7, that means you're going pro scouts and also playing to snipe the boars with your scouts. Because scouts are a lot better now at killing boars, remember. Like, their damage got halved, but their attack speed got doubled. And because damage can only be reduced to 1, it means that you actually doubled the amount of damage that scouts are doing to boars. Will be the rack. So yeah, it looks like Leenock might be getting aggressive early on. Wouldn't be surprised if he pulls the villager soon. I like that he's got the scout in position here. Leenock did go for a secondary scout, so he'll be able to get an eye on both sides. The reason I like secondary scouts for the English, by the way, isn't just the fact that it allows you to easily keep eyes on your opponent's base. It's the fact that you're getting a bigger share of the sheep. That's before we even discuss the fact that when you're playing against Rus, you should always go 2 scouts to deny equity. It's the fact that you get more sheep returned to your base. It allows you to stagger your transition of farms and thus invest that wood elsewhere, right? Into the initial lombos, into the racks, and then also into some outposts outside your opponent's base. What I hate is when I see these builds where someone builds like 6 farms and then they still rush out to build an outpost, and then you look and you realize they're not producing lombos and spears all the time because they just don't have a surplus of wood to use. Oh, LucifroN actually going for the earlier wooden fortress, so no intent to go to the ball. I'm fine with this. This will probably be the broad axe by at least 8 minutes at the latest as well. And he does have the berries right next to his base, so he's somewhat condensed, but notice the sheep are drying up fast, and one of them seems to have been murdered in the middle of nowhere. So he will have to shift out soon. Most likely it would be this deer line. The issue you might run into is if Leenock is going for this early aggressive timing, he will rush out, and this will probably be where his first outpost goes. Scouts also spotting what is coming, so LucifroN will understand he's going to need some sort of unit to address this. Chooses to go into the stable. An interesting choice considering you just saw spears pulled already. But this has been the more desired opening for the roost just because it gives you options. So typically you'll open with a stable and then you'll transition to archer ranges afterwards. The logic being is you can get your first knight out, your first horseman out, and because they're faster than any other unit in the field, they have flexibility. They can go raid your opponent's eco lines. They can pick apart reinforcements by, stabbing in from the sides when they trickle across the map. Whereas if you went for archers, they're just too slow. I shift around. He's spotting the archer range now. It's kind of crazy to watch, right, how much the roosts have evolved. It's actually wonderful to see as well. Like, this Civ just used to be Castle Age Rush and that was it. And that didn't really play towards the wood advantage at all. But what we've really started to note here in the last few weeks is how powerful the boost to the wood economy is to the roost in the early game, allowing them to actually just pivot into new military structures a lot quicker than their opponents. And then usually because it's heavy into the archer ranges, they can afford to constantly push units out of those additional military structures. The worrying factor for me right now as well is that Leenock's window is going to close very quickly if he doesn't make a move soon. Right now, he's just kind of denying on the food, assuming that his opponent's going to be playing pro scouts. But we can see there's no intent from LucifroN, so he won't be caught out like that. You will have to go in soon. Otherwise, you're going to be outscaled because as it stands right now, you've got 3 military production buildings here, right? Because the council hall is basically 2 archer ranges versus 2. In the next 3 minutes, LucifroN will boost this up to 2 more archery ranges at least, and then he'll begin outmassing you. And also keep in mind that because you're building lombos and infantry in general, they take a long time to arrive, right, with this 1.12 movement speed. And that's always the strength of being the defender, right? Like when your opponent blinks first, this is also why the English have been looking a little bit flimsy recently. The raid is slow, which means their reinforcing is slow. And it also means their retreat is slow. Like, the theme is slow. It's kind of funny, actually, because, they play with the speed of a turtle, but they don't turtle. They always go aggressive. And it's why so often they get punished for it, because it's just impossible to keep up slow reinforcements, especially considering you don't build a proxy base. Like, with the Rus, when they go hard into archers, we've seen proxy bases on boars. The English don't really have the same option because they rely only on the council hall for lombos for a long time because it's hard to actually afford lombos in mass with their additional wood cost and you not getting any additional wood as English. And you're not going to build this council hall aggressively. We saw people try and do this in the opening weeks of Age of Empires. It very quickly got picked apart because people could identify it. They understood you were delaying your feudal timing, and then also you were just undefended doing it. So you'd end up, more often than not, just sacrificing your tech up and being forced to run back and build it back in base anyway. There we go. Horsemen start to come out. Scouts being taken out as well. Leenock, that's frustrating. If he wants to replace that, it is going to cost him villager production because, remember, no stable. And numbers are building quickly for LucifroN. You begin to lose confidence in Leenock at this rate. Like, the archer ranges are now up to 2. It could easily scale into 3 in the next minute and a half. And at the same time, Leenock is barely able to keep up with demand. You can see the wood numbers right now. LucifroN is floating almost half a K worth of surplus wood. Leenock is not because he's spending 20 for each of these spearmen and then 50 for each of these longbowmen at the rate of 2 archer ranges. On top of that, he's switching over to farms. And while the farms are half price to the English, it's still a burden on your early game economy. A burden that LucifroN is not going to be impacted by because he has got these finite food sources, right? He's on the berries now. He did go back for the pro scouts at a delayed timing after building a force to defend himself. And it means now he's going to be safe for a long time. The only enemy of him might be when he forgets to drop the carcasses or if there are any sheep. But LucifroN's already got rid of all the sheep, so it means that he can't encounter the frustrating sheep-deer bug where your villagers go idle. Leenock now at 10 minutes, only getting his first outpost down. This outpost, it's an early staging point. It doesn't really give you any value, but you need this as well. Because one of the biggest weaknesses is when English players, when they try to get straight onto a person's eco lines, they don't secure the route, right? It's kind of supply line logic, right? Guerrilla Warfare 101. If you have an insecure supply line, a smart player is going to attack that supply line. This game's getting, this is a little bit too peaceful, wasn't it? The flute playing, everything laid back. It's just something about the English, right? Like, unless you see a man-at-arms rush, you just kind of know what's going to happen for the first 10 minutes. And that's the nice thing for LucifroN, right? He's able to utilize pro scouts without losing power through a lack of vision. Because when you anticipate the build for the English, 95% of the time it's right. Not much changes with this civilization. Once they start heavily investing into longbows and spears, they continue investing into longbows and spears. It's very rare that that situation ever changes. It looks like it's going to be a blacksmith first, so no additional archery just yet out of LucifroN. But he's now getting into the techs. Those techs are already there for Leenock, but remember that LucifroN is going to start outmassing. In fact, when we look at the military count, you can see he's already got the lead, right, by 4 units. That is, of course, a differential of scouts, but this is going to continue to escalate. Still no broad axes, surprisingly enough. He could easily afford it. Like, if he actually just trades across, with the surplus food he has, he could easily actually get the bang for buck there and then get double broad axe. At which point, you don't get a 15% increased gathering rate as the Rus. It's actually 18% because of the additional 20% drop-off. I do like this little optimal play by Leenock, by the way. A lot of players would have brought these villagers forward, and they would have just been AFKing, kind of twiddling their thumbs. Instead, the moment he drops the outpost, he puts them to work on the stone, understanding that he then doesn't have to reallocate workers back in base. And he'll get enough stone in the meantime to afford 2 to 3 more outposts being upgraded. It really is a who blinks first game, isn't it? I think Leenock does have to go in the next 2 to 3 minutes, though. Just because if you look at the numbers for LucifroN, he's slowly scaling. Like, he will access a castle timing if they both stick and stalemate like this. In fact, the biggest issue I see for Leenock is he didn't establish outposts near the deer sites. So he hasn't really been able to deny equity. In fact, if anything, yeah, LucifroN's already doing this. He's going around and he's taking the deer away from Leenock, directly next to his base. And Lee, because he's only pushing forces towards the front, he hasn't spotted this. And he probably never will. And now LucifroN, he goes on the aggressive. But look at this. It's actually been read perfectly. Leenock knows something is wrong here. He peels back the spearman, keeps the longbowman on the front line. He saw him. He actually got an eyeball on it. So the scouts did just about spot this rotation. He doesn't know exactly where it's coming from, but he's in position to deny it before it starts. That's really impressive, actually. I kept checking Leenock's vision. I was like, where did he see it? He must have just got a glimpse of them as they ran past the west side, and he was very quick to react. So really raw play by Big Lee. However, the issue is he now probably thinks he's safe because nothing should up. And he's dead wrong. And with this many horsemen and knights, like, if you're not paying attention instantly, 1 or 2 of these villagers are going to die. There it is, rush in, forces the garrison. And this play, this is intentional by LucifroN. It's not even about killing the villagers. He only gets 1, but now, watch what he's looking to have happen here. If Leenock runs back to his base, he's in trouble. Because LucifroN is now taking up at the back of his base where Leenock cannot possibly see it. But Leenock, he understands what this is. He sees it for his face value. It's just horsemen. It's not even insta-kill units, right? So he can look away and not instantly lose villagers. He has a small defense force here, understanding that his opponent clearly is going for a cast stage timing. So Leenock, what does he do? He preps for the rush in. He sees the ram from LucifroN, burns that down instantly, but he needs to get his own back soon. And he doesn't even have the siege workshops, or the siege engineering rather done. It's still not researched. Oh no. This might be worst case scenario as well, because although, you know, these horsemen get thrown away a little, they get whittled down and killed off, because LucifroN has gone up to 3 archery ranges, he has been outscaling Leenock now. And you can see on the military front, Lucy on the home field has got the edge. Archers are going to wait. Tech up is underway, 30 seconds out, so he'll sacrifice this Wooded Fortress. Does need to be careful of the villagers when they retreat. TC is going to start firing upon all those spearmen. Archer upgrade almost there in the meantime. Horseman keeping reinforcements busy. So Leenock, this is all he's got to work with for the next 2 minutes. Will fell 2 or 3 of these villagers. Nico lead still there for Lucy. He keeps it by 1. And after all that aggression, Leenock losing several troops, only burning down a Wooded Fortress and almost evening up the eco difference. You can see LucifroN got a lot more value with these horsemen than Leenock did with the main army. I just got to give credit to LucifroN, man. This has been very surgical. Like, this opening game, the way he played this, it might not be flashy in a lot of people's eyes. It may have been very kind of slow paced, you know, taking your time. But it's because he understands that like, when you conceptualize this matchup and the way it's being played by Leenock, there's no possible way in which Leenock is going to breach your base quickly. And there's no possible way that it's going to out-eco scale you in Feudal Age. And that's why LucifroN is so healthy up in Castle, while Leenock now has to fall back and look for Castle himself. And that means that LucifroN can now break out and get rid of all these pesky defenses. In fact, he sees those villages. He could probably kill them off as well. Speaking of killing villages, the raiding force still hasn't been addressed. Like, this is the worrying factor for Leenock. Leenock needed to be in the aggressive. At any moment, should he fall back to this situation where he's fully defensive, not only does he lose the 2 villages on the front, not only does he lose the outposts, he also loses control of his own defense. Like, this is one of those matchups where, with the way that these 2 sides are built, the only way you actually keep your defenses stable as Leenock is if your opponent is pinned into his base. Lee never achieved that goal. He got an outpost on the south side, and that was it. LucifroN was just shrugging his shoulders going, is that all you've got? And now, LucifroN will just shrug his shoulders and move towards Leenock's base freely. Trip Racks goes down. Man-at-Arms can start being produced. And Leenock, well, this timing, this is going to be a big difference here. When he went in after the Castle Age ticked up for LucifroN, he was not ready to siege in. Lucy, as you can see, with 2 rams on the way, and we'll be able to build up more soon, he is going to be ready to insta-breach into the base. And Arislet's upgrades coming out on the outpost a little bit too delayed. And this is the worst-case scenario, Leenock. He pins the horseman in the corner. They're turned into a foreign legion when he needs a defense force. That means the archers just going to move in. They start diving, just keeping forces at bay, shifting across, looking at the wood line. A few villages exposed here. Will shift away, but the archers are pursuing. And they stick in range. That should be 4 probably going down. Sticks it just for the final 1. And he'll pursue through to the other side. He's almost at where the King's Palace is, so this is problematic. For the moment, Leenock will stay alive as the wood line is well layered. However, the archer count for LucifroN has many layers too. And that's the bigger problem right now. Leenock, because he got baited to the other side of the map, he was not here to defend this. Rams will at least be cleaned up now. But when we look at the eco side, we can see that LucifroN is almost 10 eco units up, and now he will stay that way. As after Leenock goes for the Castle Age, LucifroN goes for the secondary TC. And remember that Leenock is still playing blind. He never reproduced the scout. He doesn't understand what's happening out on the map anymore. He might assume that this is a possibility, but he can never guarantee it. He can never get on the backside of his opponent's base to know for sure that he went for this eco greed. That's also now relics being banked in, so 2 about to be parked inside. That's an additional 5 villages. Like, it's a substantial lead at this stage, right? So overall, with the trickle of gold, LucifroN's over 10 villages ahead. Then LucifroN has 8 people working on wood, which is giving an extra 20%. So, like, you know, you have to add in a few more villages there. You see how these numbers start to boom. And also, because Lucy unlocked Tier 2 bounty, and he's been gathering on game for a long time as he moves out on the deer, he's also very efficient and competitive with what the English are doing with their farms now. I mean, you just gotta praise Lucy. Like, it's... Like I said, it's not a rushed game. It's very much a methodical approach to Age of Empires 4. But that's the thing. He's such a calculative player, right? He's not one of these guys who's just going to make the all-in play that maybe you will see out your kind of flashy, unusual players, right? Not to name any obvious ones, but we all have some in mind straight away. But he will play the numbers. He will just map it out and understand perfectly when he's going to be ahead. And Leenock, if he wants to get back into this game now, he will need to transition. Man-at-Arms alone, probably not going to cut it. especially considering you're not building siege. This is also why the English feel so fragile and uncomfortable at this stage in the game. Most other civs are just scaling into siege pretty cozily, right? The Rus, as an example, with 20% additional wood income into their eco, and also good trades through the Golden Gate, they can usually afford their initial siege investments very quickly. The English struggle because they spend so much onto Lombos, and also spears are seen as a viable unit as well. That's a lot of wood already out of your eco. Then on top of that, you need to find wiggle room to spend 300 wood for the siege workshop, and then the wood required to build the siege. It's a big ask. There is another alternative for the English, but it doesn't come in until mid-castle, and that is the castles themselves. If you're able to afford the 800 stone keeps, they do function as one of every military building. But it's a heavy investment, especially at the beginning of the Castle Age, and it's why we see that be the point where most English players end up waving the white flag. Archers begin to march out. Double Mangonel now. Leenock, no solution to this just yet either. He really does need that siege workshop or a keep. But look at the stone numbers. It's not going to be a keep. It has to be a siege workshop. Like, you can't play into these Magos, really. That's the problem. He doesn't have a fast unit to gap close upon them. Here it comes. First rock's about to be fired. Moves a little bit deeper to ensure they cannot retreat away. They spread out. Front lines clashing. Man-at-arms just enough to hold him at bay. Archers backstep for the moment. The flank attack isn't going to be strong enough. These man-at-arms being focused fired down one by one. The torch is out, but they're not going to be able to do the deeps required to get through the siege line fast enough. As the front line of Leenock is going to fall. Rolling further. One Mago might go down, but one more is going to be enough to deter Leenock away. He has to retreat with the Lombos in force. And it means that LucifroN is going to start gaining ground here. All he needs to do now is start to stack up the wood and get the rams out, and then he can breach this base easy peasy. Right now, he's making it look so easy peasy, though. Magos are a little bit slow because he hasn't got his hands on the greased axles yet. Heavy investment of 350 wood, but Lucy could go for it easily now. And it's very effective against the Lombos because if the Lombo player isn't maximizing his distance and paying attention at all times, you get caught off guard. Like, this unit is 1.12 movement speed. The Mangonels with that juiced up movement speed, although being slower, it's comparatively similar in a way that you're actually able to keep on top of them. Especially considering the Magos have additional range, right? 9 tower range compared to 7. And now, speaking of those Magos, wraparound is good. LucifroN gets a little bit greedy here. Pushing away the Lombos, but ends up sacrificing the Mangonels. As the flank attack is good. But reinforcements are coming, and LucifroN, look at the stone gathering right now. He's going for the forward keep drop. And with enough archers here, he's able to deter Leenock away. The Lombo battalion is not going to hold. The crossbows in the mix is good enough against the man-at-arms. And this keep will establish dominance right in Leenock's base. And I don't know how he stops it. He doesn't know how he stops it. He instantly calls GG the moment he sees this being built. Game 1 opens up with a Lucy win. Oh, what a way to turn it. I mean, like I said, folks, I know some people, they're going to be looking, they're going, yeah, that was a little bit of a slow game. There wasn't maybe enough back and forth for my liking. Maybe we need more tactical nuke demo ships. Can we get some water hybrid maps? I get you. Like, that won't be everyone's cup of tea because some people will look and they'll go, you know, this wasn't like the high-octane game I was expecting from English Rus. LucifroN just sat in his base for 15 minutes. He did. Absolutely. And it's because of Leenock's earlier choices. His outposts aren't placed aggressively to force conflict early on. He doesn't deny the Pro Scouts play, which comes delayed so it catches him off guard because he assumes his opponent just isn't going for it. Like, this all happens because of the way LucifroN intentionally played this. He keeps himself condensed to ensure the English can't harass him. He doesn't go for the ball play where he'd be exposed. He then also only goes to Pro Scouts once he's built up a defense force that will deter Leenock away. And then from there on out, he looks at Leenock and says, if you don't make a move, I'm coming out ahead. Make a move. And Leenock takes far too long to make that move. He doesn't transition into an eco-scaling himself. He doesn't shift towards more aggressive outposts. Instead, he throws his force away, burning a single wooden fortress down, gets forced to retreat, and from that point on, it's just cruise mode for LucifroN, and too simple for him to close this one out. It is, of course, only game 1, though. Remember that these are best of 3s, so at least one more game ahead of us. And in that game, really, like LucifroN, he doesn't have to change much, right? His read on the situation was perfect. What I need to see is something different from Leenock, because I feel like he got played like a fiddle. His moves were too easily anticipated, and he kind of became very rigid in his approach to the game, which is usually an issue that is caused by the English playstyle more than the player. It's very hard to find a way out of a hole when you find yourself one in it as the English, because the Civ just doesn't have the same layer of flexibility or sudden 90-degree turns that other Civs may have access to. And it really does come down to the economical benefits being kind of weirdly staggered later into like the Castle and the Imperial. It just hurts their ability to adjust at the 20-minute mark, and it's something that was just too easy for LucifroN to exploit. Well, let's focus on this. Let's get back underway, because this is game number 2 in the upper bracket. Only one could continue through. We've arrived at that stage. I know LucifroN and Leenock, 2 incredibly talented individuals. You'd love to see him go all the way, but it just doesn't work that way. Someone has to be taken down. And a lot of people would assume that this is going to even up, that a third game could come out here, because, you know, Leenock, the Mongols are dominant at multiple stages. We were highlighting how the English do have some potency with the galleys at the beginning, right? Like in the feudal age. However, as it goes on, this shifts heavily in favor of the Mongols in the naval front. They get access to the war junks, to the bow chads. They are able to obliterate the English at the Castle and Imperial Age timings on the water. So if LucifroN wants to dominate here, he needs to be very aggressive in the feudal age to achieve his goals. It could also be that he chooses to manipulate water for fishing in the meantime and then fall back into a full landmass later on, something we have seen a few more players doing, because if your timings are right, you can actually exploit your opponent before they get too economically forward of you due to how powerful fishing economy is. Alright, looks like we're good on stream now. Everyone can see anything and everything fantabulously, which is what I want. So early on, Leenock is going into the stable. A surprising choice here, actually. We've seen the barracks before. Occasionally you might see archer ranges. Not so much stables. Usually the racks play is the most logical one, because you shift out with a villager and you drop an outpost on your opponent's wood line. It would be problematic to do on this map as well. Leenock doesn't quite see the layout of the base fully, but we see from our perspective, from our God vision, that LucifroN has double wood line next to each other, which means that you can't just say, you know, there's a single wood line that I can completely obliterate you by getting rid of, which would be the case if it was the other way around. Like, imagine if this was Mongol. If you manage to sneak an outpost on this wood line that Leenock has, he's screwed. There's no nearby wood he can rely upon. Fishing, just starting to scale. Like, notice that LucifroN is head, and it's because of this. It's the Uvu. The Uvu slowed down Leenock a lot. This has always been an issue for the Mongols, and actually there's been an argument recently, especially in this current tournament, this current round on Boulder Bay, for going the Uvu to get the dock up quicker so that you can scale your eco a little bit faster. This almost always puts you behind on your tech timing when you rush towards feudal with your opponent, just because in the case of the English, they don't have to invest 150 wood into something else back here. That's what you've done with this Uvu. And while it will pay dividends later on because it's gaining passive stone right now, in the meantime, it stunts your early game economy. Kind of crazy to say something that generates resources for free stunts your early game economy, right? Like, in theory, in 25 stone, it's going to have paid for itself. I mean, it already has, right? Because he went for the double horseman production. But, Lee, I've got bad news for you, my friend. He invested in 3 horsemen, and LucifroN was miles ahead of him. This is actually really well placed by Lucy. So, Lucy, he drops the dock. He makes 100 wood investment. A lot of people may have said this was a little bit rushed. You know, maybe he could have waited for a reaction. The reaction would have made it too late, right? If he was doing this reactionarily, he loses 1 or 2 to the horseman. More important than that, he can afford to do this blind because although he spent 100 wood here, Leenock spent 150 wood here. And now, after he sets this up, he makes it worthwhile because he rushed 5 villages out here, the perfect amount of garrison, and they can now gather off of the shoreline fish, where actually villagers have a phenomenal gathering rate. It's one of the highest in the game. In fact, why don't some people right now, because we got a wonderful amount of people in chat, why don't they take a guess at what they think the gathering rate is for shoreline fish for villagers? Because I think people are going to be surprised by this. Because let me give you some comparatives. Deep water fish for a fishing boat is 1.1 fish. That's pretty good, right? Shoreline fish for a fishing boat is 0.75. If I gave you those numbers, where would you stick villagers? I'm even making it easy for you. Look how quick that number is. Are you counting in your head right now? Because if you were, you'd come out with a very respectable 1 food a second. That's nuts. That is absolutely bonkers, right? It's that efficient. So next time you're playing on a map like this, if you can actually drop an outpost, you can justify hanging around the shoreline fish, you'll get your value. The only downside, of course, is remember that they do have a lot of idle time walking back. But that idle time, like, that's the difference maker, right? If sheep is a gather rate of, let's say, what is it? It's 0.75, right? And you're gathering at 1, I feel like that makes up the difference in the idle time of walking. Like, you're pretty comparative. And at the same time, you now have a Rapido build force on the front line of your dock line, ready to build up additional docks, repairing damage done, and also set up any sort of proxy base you need. It's really powerful. And yeah, someone just correctly identified. It's basically a boar. A boar, by reference, compared to shoreline fish, is 0.9 by default. Shoreline fish, for villagers, is better than the boar. Of course, the boar has better value in that you carry more food before returning. And I think that's the only reason we haven't seen more people leveraging this, is the weakness of going onto shoreline fish like this can be that they can only carry 10 food until you get the wheelbarrow upgrade, which you're unlikely to get quickly because, well, your wood eco is stretched thin by your investment in docks, and you don't need a mill for on-land food, right? And that's why he isn't collecting more fish right now. He hasn't actually bothered to invest into a mill. Aggression coming out on both sides right now. Horseman's still trying to breach through. We did see the shift across the first galley, and it forced a double investment in light junks, which is why LucifroN is backing up now. He's going to rush up the second dock, but he needs to be careful. Oh, no! Leenock, he sees him. Peels back just in time. Second galley comes out. He tries to shift in on the villagers, but too little, too late. And now the focus fire coming in. You can see the difference in damage. Galley's able to burst attack. 6 bursts at 10 damage each. Meanwhile, the light junks, half the damage. 3 bursts at 10. And that's before we also equate the fact that the galleys have additional health and additional missile resistance. Which means when you do the maths here, well, these light junks are doing 15 damage per round of attacks. The galleys, on the other hand, are doing a phenomenal amount of damage. 42 damage per burst. It's crazy, I know. And that's why galleys are actually worth the additional price now. They used to be bugged. Their damage wasn't actually adding up correctly. But now that they've been fixed, it is totally worth the additional investment. We talked about the cost, right? Like, it's a 210 resource unit versus a 360 resource unit. You expect it to perform better. You probably didn't expect it to perform that much better. Double galley in position. Needs to be careful to peel back. One of the weaknesses of the galleys can be this. If you look at the movement speed, you can see there's a healthy lead for the light junks. Of course, the disadvantage of having to turn around to fire back isn't as big as it used to be because every ship now has this, as they did nerf naval combat, so you can't just drive by and fire upon your opponents anymore. You do have to look at them and stop. When you do look at them and stop, you can just see the damage that comes out. I mean, it's pretty spooky for Leenock. He'll keep his opponent pinned in for the moment, but he's not going to stop him from fishing. And you can already see a shift to the south side, ensuring that Leenock is not going to wrap round to get down there. And LucifroN, he'll be the first one up into Castle Age. Leenock is still trailing behind. Remember, he made a heavy investment here. In fact, if you do the maths on this, Leenock is more in the hole, right? It's 180 on each of the galleys. Look at the investment. It's 2 galleys, and now it's been, what, 7 on the light junk? Light junk's costing 90 gold each. So really, Leenock is heavily invested into trying to take control of Naval and Feudal. But now that the tech up comes out, he needs to do it here. He needs to do it now before the first Hulks come out. And I don't know if his focus fire is going to be good enough. Galley's wasting his time. He has to address it. Turns onto the fishing boats now. LucifroN's going to shift them away. Galley's able to heal up. And look how close it is to coming out. 5 seconds until the Hulk arrives. And heavy damage will be done to the junks. And that means this investment is going to be a sunk investment, literally here. As look how quickly they get blitzed down now. It's just inconsequential damage being returned to the Hulk. And the Hulk, as it swivels around, heavy deeps into Leenock's naval force. And all of a sudden, Leenock, now trailing, has to rush up 15 people, trying to boom him up with a step redoubt. That will accelerate his goal, but remember, acceleration is happening on the other side. LucifroN understandably went for the King's Palace, so his eco is going to start to boost quickly. And even further so if he moves out quick enough here, because, yes, Leenock is very close to taking up, but once he does, it's 45 seconds for the junks for the war junks, the big boys that can beat the Hulks. And by the time you do that, with the sales upgrade as well, Lucy, he could probably have 3 Hulks, maybe 4 in the field. Depends how much gold he wants to be gathering, though. Light junks are going to be forced away. Does need to start prioritizing the docks. Because right now, with 3 on the naval line, Leenock can quickly just produce enough war junks to repel you away. This is why he needs to focus it down. I don't know if it's going to be quick enough without cycling. If he shifts to the south side and cycles, he'll probably do more damage here. He just needs to be careful not to get in range of this other dock. As the goal here is to deny them one by one, shutting down the production rate of the war junks. But as that's happening, look what happens behind him. Leenock once again goes in and frustrates with the remaining light junks, trying to find their value and slow down the fishing. But I don't know if this is quick enough. LucifroN, he wasn't min-maxing the damage. If he'd actually been doing it originally, he would have already sunk the dock. And instead, first war junk comes out. And Hulks will shift away. That's the edge he has, right? 1.29 compared to the 1.15, as they both do have sails. But Hulks, by default, are slightly quicker. And that dock should eventually burn. You can see also, just the attack ship's going to get the extra ballistas, so adding any deeps in he can. But a quick shift across. LucifroN bringing out more Hulks. Heavy damage done here. The war junk's in trouble. Big mistake made. Doesn't have the range on both of them to fight, and it means it's just min-maxing. LucifroN is getting the edge here. Look at the tower range. 7 to the 6.5. It means he can stay just out of range and take them out one by one. Leenock, with this suboptimal formation, pays the price. And all of a sudden, what should have been an instant switch of power on the water, it's not as easily found for Leenock. LucifroN will end up sacrificing one of these Hulks, but he'll peel back for the moment. Raid in. Was that successful? Were there even villagers here anymore? I think he may have killed a few villagers here, yeah. But it's not that big of a deal anymore for Lucy, remember. Lucy has had the King's Palace for a few minutes. He's starting to boom up, and it means that Leenock needs to find a way of punishing him on land now. Because LucifroN is becoming less reliant on water. Leenock, although the step readout does pad your gold, it doesn't fix your other resources, so you still are heavily reliant on the power of sea. And that's why he invests so much now before on the war junk line. And no switch into land still. Like LucifroN, he gets the racks for a defense force of spears, but that is absolutely it. And also now making sure he's extracting more wood as well. Understandably needs to pad that. You can see he's got way too much gold, not enough wood. And that's why he's starting to fall behind. These war junks, just not only more efficient one-on-one, but it's just the fact that the economy is a little bit stronger from Leenock. I mean, he's invested a lot of people in wood. LucifroN even more so as he switches across from the gold heavy, but he's just not able to afford it at the same pace. These 5 Hulks, some of them heavily damaged. Needs to be careful about the way he engages here, but heavy damage to Leenock as well. And Leenock, he's getting baited in here. He just can't take the fights like this. This is bad for him. This is the worry. If Leenock keeps coming out to the mid-ground like this and then retreating, he's going to take damage and never return fire. We already highlighted this. Like, while the war junks are absolute godly units on the sea, this is where they have a slight disadvantage. The movement speed and the tile range. Being notably slower than the Hulks and having 0.5 less range means that a high-level player will exploit this and just shift to the absolute edge, ensuring you can never return fire and he gets free shots out. Nice ball in the fishing as well. Just ensures everything gets healed up. Hulk shifting down. Forces Leenock's response, but Leenock's response is a little bit too slow here. Oh, war junk goes down. Nice hit. And the fishing boats, they're taking the brunt of the fire, which means that you're not even targeting out the Hulks right now. Remember the cost of these, by the way. War junks, 300 wood, 210 gold. Look at that in comparison. 270 wood, 216 gold. So this is actually more cost efficient for LucifroN. And he's definitely getting better bang for buck right now. More Hulks coming in. Production rates are increasing very quickly, and it's putting Leenock at a sheer disadvantage. You can see on the numbers right now. How does he fight up against this? It's hard to say, especially with the dock starting to be exposed. He's once again gone back trying to get his hands on the extra ballistas. Remember, he was researching this before but cancelled it. And I don't know why he even wants it that badly. I mean, I don't even think it's going to be good enough here. The swivel ballistae only makes sense if you're able to get in range, and you're not able to get in range at all. Trade out. Passive healing just not good enough to deal with the deeps of the Hulks. New war junk comes out. Focus fire instantly onto it. Heavy damage being done down to half HP already. Once again, peeling back. But even if you trade out evenly, remember that LucifroN is ahead. He has the edge there. His eco scaling up economically in villager count. Although the step readout has given more gold over to Leenock, he's using more gold to buy these units. Well, to be more specific, he's using more wood. But overall, more resource. LucifroN ramping it up. 3 fresh Hulks, fresh off the line, straight in. War Junk's depleting quickly. I think we're almost done on the sea here. Now, the Ballista upgrades are the only thing keeping LucifroN from pushing his opponent out easily. These Ballista upgrades do a lot of damage, 110 to boats. But he goes to the north side, where there's only an arrow slits upgrade, and this outpost not going to last long. Hulks move in, cleans up the fleet, cleans up the dock line, and Leenock, he needs a fallback plan, he needs it fast. One man at arms, I don't really feel like that is the true fallback plan right now. He needs more troops than this. Now the question is, knowing Leenock, he's a very big TC enthusiast when he plays the Mongols. Is this where you go for a secondary town center? Is this where you recover on land? Because you've got to do something. You can't just sit in a corner now and allow your opponent to not only have the fish advantage, but also the villager advantage. Well, there we go. Full control now achieved by LucifroN. LucifroN will probably look to spread himself out, as players usually do in this situation. Even deletes a lot of the heavily injured Hulks. Remember, you don't need that many to box your opponent in and keep them off the water. And it frees up PopCap to now invest into land forces. Leenock, his wood situation is going to get very frustrating. This is actually a really tilting generation for a Mongol player in this sort of situation. The reason being is while your opponent has like 2 big, bulky wood lines and a bunch of small ones, you've got 1 big, bulky wood line, and then you look like a 10-year-old trying to grow a beard, right? Like you've got this patchwork everywhere. The reason this is going to be frustrating is it means you have to keep moving the Gers constantly. Your wood line keeps shifting, and also, if you want to keep efficiency in terms of gathering, you want the deer stone effect. So you're going to have to build outposts out here as well. Khan going down at an unfortunate time as well. Ooh, that's a lot of sheep. Sheep that he could have used as well. You can see how heavily invested the pastures now just to try and float his economy. But he's vastly behind LucifroN. You can see the numbers. And Lucy, now with the hard switch in. Hard commitment into the stables. And because the Khan went down, Leenock is now playing a blind game. He's playing a very dangerous game of Russian roulette here. Like, the last thing he saw was spears and archers. And because that was the last thing he saw, look what he's doing. He's going into Vet Horsemen. Vet Horsemen that will not fare well up against the Knights here. Especially if you're on the defensive. And you're going to be on the defensive at this rate. And in that situation, like, yes, you'll have the movement speed, but where are you going to run? This front, he hasn't traveled out to the tippity top of Boulder Bay yet. He hasn't worked his way all the way down the shaft to get the maximum trade, because that is now an option available to him, right? He can go for the maximum distance trade, and he can get huge amounts of income off the waterfront. So Leenock. Now transitioning Lancers. Oh, sorry, Horsemen, rather. I feel like Lancers would have been the better player here. Like, you just have a gold advantage, right? In theory, you should be able to at least match what LucifroN produces on his gold line. And if he's producing Knights now, you're at an advantage. It seems to me like Leenock, because he's playing blind, he's making that anticipation that his opponent is going to produce Lombos. And the read is just wrong. Like, LucifroN understands that if he produces Lombos, they're not a cost-efficient solution to run across the map. He might have a small contingent, but he's not going to be heavily reliant upon them. And also, these walls going up are going to ensure that Leenock won't be able to even get eyeballs on what's happening. Still no trade coming out. And I wouldn't be surprised if LucifroN doesn't engage with trade at all now. Like, trade delays this game a lot longer than you need to, and it offers a bounce-back point, because the Mongols in the Imperial Age, they do have some advantages over the English. Most notable would be their Springald range with shutter triggers improved, giving them additional range to that of which the English can get. And then, of course, their ability to build siege up in the field is a big boon to them. Initial clash here would favor Leenock, and he does have the Yam movement speed. Moves straight in. Too many veteran horsemen. Heavy damage being done there. Knights forced to retreat. Remember, these horsemen do move quicker than Knights, so they kind of lose or lose, right? The only thing that's keeping him safe, of course, is the parked Hulks here. And that's one of the big edges he has. If he actually skirts around the shoreline, he can get very close to Leenock's base without Leenock being able to harass him with these superior movement speed horsemen. And it is the composite of Lancers now in the mixer as well. And onto the board. Interesting. So LucifroN, despite the fact he has a lot of fishing, he wants to pad his eco on land. I think he's just trying to exploit every resource nearby before moving out. He wants to leave himself as strong as possible for when he plays for the midfield, because he understands now that his opponent's gone heavily into cavalry, Leenock isn't going to allow him to have this land for free. Leenock can't afford to because he no longer has the sea himself. So peaceful out here for Lucian. It's not often you on Boulder Bay imagine the English having control of the water, but it's a new day, it's a new age. Like, maybe English's true calling is now on water hybrid maps, because it just looks so much better than it used to. Like, this fixing of the galleys, so they actually function correctly now, has changed everything about the water balance. Especially in conjunction with the change that you can no longer drive by with faster ships. Now the night count. It's escalating so fast. Actually faster than Leenock's by the look of it. Okay, nope. Spoke too soon. I was about to say, you could hear the puzzling nature of my voice there. I was like, there's no way he's being outproduced right now. He has so many stables, and he has an Uvu as well. And also, he did go for that second TC. So he needs to play for that midfield soon, understands that, and thus he needs disposable villagers to bring him income. Knight's peeling back for the moment, but now we start to see the weakness. If you get forced these choke points, how do you wrap on the crossbow battalion? Springwood upgrades are going to be frustrating. That's delaying him right now. Like, this is the reason LucifroN hasn't advanced. He doesn't know how many Springwalls in outposts are parked back here. They are quite ludicrous things. You have more outposts trying to be built up, because remember, it's not just about the defenses, it's the Yam movement speed. It's the one edge Leenock can have in a cavalry battle. Everything else kind of works against him. And now, look what Lucy's doing. He's playing towards the Sacred Site, trying to bait his opponent out. Brought the Monks forward to be able to heal up. Clash. Holds at the front line. Needs to peel it back for the moment. Hulk's coming in range as well. That's going to do a lot of damage. We can actually just start step back and forth and swing around. And more Hulk shifting across, which will give the edge over to LucifroN and make this trade worthwhile. It looks like Leenock has to run, but he doesn't want to. He wants to kill as many off as possible because the Monks will heal up any damaged units here. At the end of that, that ends up being a damn good trade for Leenock. The amount of Knights remaining, and when you consider Leenock, the number advantage he had, this is how powerful the Hulks are. They're so oppressive. 100 damage per shot. And you're only mitigating 6 of that damage on a unit of 230 health. After that, after it's all said and done, here he is. Monkey Boy's out. Needs to go out for the Sacred Site on the island at some point. I'm expecting a transport ship soon, because that's just free gold trickle as well. And then also you can pick up the relic while you're there, right? Because now that he's invested in the monastery, you can see he's already got 2 relics. And at this rate, it should be at least 3, possibly 4. In fact, no, it should only be, yeah, 3, because Leenock did go into it himself. But Leenock, what? He never picked this up. This is free gold. I mean, admittedly, he doesn't need more gold, right? That's the thing he's got too much of, but it's free. Just take it, damn it. Moving in, LucifroN now taking a fight without the assistance of the Hulks. Less desirable. And starting to sink those Hulks as he needs to actually free up PopCap here. Trebuchet's now rolling out in the front line, so the outposts are going to go down. Lucy marching in very aggressive with some villagers here. And look how many villagers on the front line for Leenock trying to rush up the outpost. He needs the Yam movement speed. He needs it here now. Mangonel shot out. Not good enough damage, though. And LucifroN will flood in. Knights move past onto the Mangonel. Not enough spears here to turn away. Frontline holds in the meantime the choke point with the crossbows to follow through. And it means Leenock's Lancers are not trading favorably here. Wrap around on the Springles. Not enough to finish them off. That Springle damage feels negligible here. And a very confused Gur has arrived on the front. It's like, guys, look at me. Pay attention to me. Don't attack my buildings. LucifroN is like, wait, I'm not going to fall for that. There's nothing dangerous about this here. There's no roadkill damage. Your Gur is useless. This keep, however, is not. LucifroN rushing it up. Lancers chasing in, trying to hold the choke point here, getting between him and the villager force. Villager's almost done. Has to pull a few back. Defense arrow comes out, but defense arrow will not get you through this quicker. It will hold your front line, but it's not going to address the villagers. The keep is going to be constructed. LucifroN, with a 4 defense point, is going to force Leenock away. That's going to hurt him on the retreat as well. Several villagers being butchered on the exit here. As the peppering comes out, remember, the English, they fire double the amount of arrows. It stings. Now with this front line established, like LucifroN, it's an opportunity for a proxy base. He can set up siege workshops here. He can get springles of his own. Or he could build even more knights and just raid through, because he understands that Leenock, in a fragile state, doesn't have a solid front line to hold long enough. He can't spread wide enough to stop the wraparound, and it means that English knights, and I can't believe I'm saying this, are proving dominant right now. And Leenock, he was trying to save the wood at the back for later. He needs that wood now. He did sneak new docks up, so he is back on the waterfront with the war junks. But limited in where he can go, and this just got identified, so LucifroN instantly pulls 3 new fresh hulks onto the waterfront. And you know that Leenock is not going to invest in more, right? Like, he's going to stop at 2 war junks because they're just safe between the docks right now. And he needs his resources on land. Look at the numbers. Leenock is drained on gold and wood. And food is not long behind it. A worrying situation for the Mongol player. And nuke keeps going up. And remember, these keeps, they're your siege workshops. If you want additional siege on the front, you can build it there. You can also build knights out of these. Right now, it looks like LucifroN is just building them back in base and sending them forward. It's kind of funny how often I watch players not use keeps for production. It's going to be to do with key bindings more than anything else, right? But, like, it is a missed opportunity. Especially when you get several of them on the front line. Knights riding in. More spawns to fall. And the map is shrinking quick. And Leenock hasn't got anywhere to go right now. He's running out of resources. I mean, what's the step readout situation? Oh, my lord, that's the last one he's got. So if he can't make something happen with the next 8,000 gold, he's dead. There is no way out at that point. LucifroN starts to extend out into the midfields, moving on to new gold veins, while keeping his opponent pinned in. And it's not going to be easy for him to break out, not with a double keep here. Treb's rolling up. Mago shots out. Knight's able to tank it for the time being. Fullback coming in from Leenock, as Leenock, trying to save some gold, is resorting to Lancers and Horsemen together instead. Back up for the moment. We'll look to re-engage under the assistance of the keep, and the attack speed buff as well means LucifroN can take good trades here. Yam movement speed on one side, attack speed on the other. But I gotta give it to him. I mean, it's pretty powerful for the English. No network of citadels, mind you, so he's not doubling that attack speed. But it's still a substantial increase in DPS. Leenock may have the mobility, but he does not have the firepower. Horseman able to shift onto the crossbow line. Spread out of the lines. Will initially favor Leenock due to the Mangonel spam coming out, and it does force LucifroN away, but still no true ground gained for Leenock, just keeping his opponent at bay on Boulder Bay. And now, gets a little bit stalemated again. LucifroN still not going for that Sacred Site, but it doesn't feel like he needs it. His win condition isn't a Sacred Site timer. Like, he understands that right now, Leenock has to come out. He doesn't need to go for the Sacred Site to force him out. Instead, Leenock is running out of resources, so naturally he's going to have to come out to the midfield in the next 3 to 4 minutes. And while he's prepping for that, LucifroN is already pop-capped and on his way up. A Wingard palace being built on the front line. It's because I like calling it the Winnie Guard. Good old Winnie Guard. He could have went for the Berkshire Palace, actually. Berkshire would have been pretty nice here. But it's just going to give him cost-efficient armies, right? You can just max Trebs on the front line now. And it's just more reinforcements quicker. And to be honest, in this game, like, anything he does is a win. So you might as well just build the thing that has win in the name. Treb starting to build up. Starting to siege through the keeps. LucifroN, it's like, do I throw away these troops? I've got 1,000,001 waiting to be reproduced back in base. Leenock, he's still not even pop-capped. Oh my. Knights, gonna distract him, raiding in. He needs to respect this. No, he's not reacting at all. He goes straight for the keep. Fight underway, in the choke point. Knights able to hold him at bay. Maximum damage coming out from the ranged battalion here. And he just can't get around. The keep's still standing. The heavy losses, no, Leenock. So many dead troops here. On both sides, but at the end of it, look at the Knights, they're raiding in. They'll finally be addressed, but how much damage is going to be done? Leenock, Eco is going to start shrinking here. In the meantime, LucifroN retreats to the secondary keep, forfeiting the first over. But at the end of this, both armies are going to be depleted, but the difference is how quickly LucifroN is going to replace his... Look at his pop cap, look at Leenock. Leenock is shrinking. He's shriveling up while LucifroN is getting swollen and big. And LucifroN, oh, he had to deny the tech up. Instead, he has to fall back. He's learned his lesson here. That was a little bit of a whoopsie-daisy. Instead, he will build the Wingard Palace back in his base. But now Leenock understands. He saw that tech up attempt. He understands what his opponent is doing, and he realizes that he has to come out very quickly now. He's running out of time very, very fast. You know, people have different names to this map, but I don't know if you're a Minecraft fan. Is this not just Creeper Bay, looking at the water? It's just Creeper Bay, right? Seems appropriate as well, because it feels like all too often these naval dominance situations, they creep up on you. Used to be due to boom ships, sometimes due to the stealth seas. But I gotta give it to LucifroN. The English pick definitely crept up on me and Leenock in this match. The Mongols should have been dominant, but they look lost in the face of English supremacy. Hulks will deny him off the gold as well. Oh no! LucifroN could have done this a lot sooner, but now Leenock, he's gold starved. Look at the income per minute. It's about to start sinking. Down to 235. That's just his passive gold and the remainder of what was now drying up. And look at the move from LucifroN. He beats him to the punchline. Outpost rush between the two. Troops in position to try and deny the outpost from going up. The rush straight forward onto LucifroN's villager line. Villagers almost done with the construction. Should be able to garrison inside. Instead, they're going for the mining camp, not paying attention. But it's not a freebie because look what he actually sacrificed. No! Leenock! He's throwing away a lot of his siege here. He chased after villagers, and it's going to cost him dearly. Mangonels being burnt down by just a few man-at-arms. Villagers just in time to save the last one. But heavy damage to the siege line. A siege line that Leenock cannot afford to replace right now. LucifroN backs up for the moment. He will be pursued by the spears, the remaining lances. More mangonels wheeling in, but Leenock, that was a fragile state. Quickly replaces the losses. But too close for comfort. New keep trying to be constructed. A lot of villagers on the front line. 34 pulled for this. That means that he cannot deny it before it can be built. LucifroN, he understands right now, if he can deny this gold, Leenock is done. Because he won't be able to replace the losses that lie ahead of him. And the golden hat upgrades are there. These man-at-arms are chunky boys, 180 health. Mago's having so many targets and only so few of them. And a never-ending Congo line of death heading in. Moves in straight away onto the Mangonel. Not quick enough. Can't save it. Torch damage just too damn strong. And that is a pricey investment to replace. And without the anti-clump, how do you now deal with them? The man-at-arms are too strong. 9 melee resistance, 9 missile resistance, 16 damage, and 180 health. I'm reading a lot of numbers. And those numbers, Mason, I'll tell you what they mean. They mean the English are here to reign supreme. Keep goes down. But so does everything on the front line for Leenock. And a keep goes up right next to this gold line. Leenock on repair duty before he can get on gold duty. And he's looking like he's on a big duty. Because he's going to poop his pants when he sees what's riding over the hill here. It's Bombards. LucifroN now moving in for the killing blow. And Leenock barely having any standing military force. 29. He's been reduced to a rabble of brigands in the tree lines. And the Trebs will try to take out the keep, but the time being bought is allowing LucifroN to quickly surge forward with a new force. Now heading into the elite Lombos, which are juiced up with the arrow volley. Turning them from Lombos into Gatling bows. Bombard. That's a little bit of a freebie. Baits out the Lancers, though. Heavy damage being done. He's got to respect this now. Remember, these Lombos doing 12 damage per shot. You're only having 6 missile resistance, taking half damage. It still adds up quickly. Man-at-arms marching in as fast as possible. The formation shuffle to move straight in on the Mangonels. They also distract the front line, which means now the Lombos can pick apart the Lancers from afar. And in the meantime, the Mangonels are still falling. Second one being torched does go down. Villager's not able to save it. Shifts across. Tanky unit still alive somehow. And Leenock is not. He taps out. He flatlines. He's down in that lower bracket. LucifroN cleans it up with an unorthodox English pick on Boulder Bay that makes it look like Boulder Bay because the ball's on this lad. to pick English against Mongols and then trounce them so effectively. It's no small feat. What a pure jam. What a phenomenal game. What a turn. The way that LucifroN played this, understanding that galleys are actually powerful now. They're not this weak-ass piece of crap that does nothing for you. They are a leviathan on the feudal age water, and it's something that baited Leenock into a heavy investment at that stage. You saw how many additional light junks he pushed out. That staggered his timing. He missed his window. Had he been quicker on the war junks, this game possibly looks very different. But LucifroN played him like a fiddle. Between the efficiency, and I mean efficiency, of his early game economy, with the fish being gathered by the villagers as well as the boats, leading into just enough galleys to rope Leenock into the feudal age, he set himself up perfectly to shift far ahead of his opponent and dominate in Castle Age when it's most critical to do so. Because remember, whenever you talk about naval, the final hop-on point into the water is Castle. Once an opponent is in Castle, they're at a stage where they can actually dominate you and lock you off the water very effectively. And that's what happened here. From that point on, LucifroN's economy was always stronger, and he understood that he could afford to play a long con here, where Leenock was very desperately and very quickly going to be forced to shift out from his initial holdings into the midfield, where LucifroN could exploit him and take a dominant 2-0 here over Big Lee.